The account of Deborah, Israel's sole female judge, presents a captivating tale of bravery, belief, and guidance through troubled times. In a world controlled by men, Deborah emerged not simply as a governing figure but as a prophet whom the entire community honored. Her account prompts us to reconsider our assumptions regarding leadership, and it demonstrates that God has the power to work through anyone, without regard to their gender or position in society, in order to fulfill His divine intentions. Let us explore this compelling story and learn how one remarkable woman contributed to altering the direction of Israel's narrative. Following Joshua's passing, Israel entered into a chaotic era referred to as the time of the judges. This represented an age marked by significant governmental and religious uncertainty for the Lord's chosen people. The lack of a powerful, unified authority resulted in conditions of ethical and communal disorder. The Book of Judges captures this disorganized state effectively. In the 25th verse of chapter 21, the text states that during those days, Israel existed without a monarch, and each individual acted according to their own judgment. Throughout this period, Israel became trapped in a repeating pattern of abandonment, subjugation, and rescue. The community would stray from God, give their devotion to the false gods of surrounding cultures, and consequently experience suffering under the control of hostile forces. During their anguish, they would call upon God, who would subsequently appoint a judge to free them. This sequence was far more than mere historical happenstance. Rather, it served as a direct manifestation of the covenant bond that existed between God and Israel. The Book of Judges offers a clear description of this recurring cycle. In verses 14 through 16 of chapter 2, we discover a brief account of this behavioral pattern. Angered by Israel's actions, the Lord handed them over to plunderers who robbed them of their possessions. He delivered them to hostile neighbors on every side, leaving them unable to mount any defense. Each time Israel marched out for combat, the Lord's power worked against them, bringing about their defeat, exactly as He had warned them. They found themselves in terrible anguish. Following this, the Lord brought forth judges who rescued them from the grasp of those who plundered them. This repeating pattern transcended being simply a collection of past events. It stood as compelling evidence of God's steadfast reliability, even when confronted with His people's continued disloyalty. Every instance, when Israel turned their backs, God permitted them to face the results of the decisions they had made. Yet He never completely withdrew His presence from them. Whenever they reached out for assistance, God, in His compassion, invariably answered their plea. Within this environment of spiritual rebellion and domination, one of the harshest trials that Israel would encounter came into being. The Book of Judges offers information regarding this severe circumstance. In verses 1 through 3 of chapter 4, the text reveals that once more the Israelites committed acts that displeased the Lord. This occurred after Ehud had died. Consequently, the Lord placed them under the authority of Jabin, the Canaanite monarch who ruled from Hazor. Sisera, who commanded Jabin's military forces, operated from Harosheth Hagoyim. Sisera possessed 900 chariots constructed with iron, and he had subjected the Israelites to harsh treatment for a span of 20 years. In their desperation, they appealed to the Lord seeking relief. Jabin, the Canaanite ruler, along with his formidable commander Sisera, established a ruthless system of control throughout Israel. Possessing a militarily advanced force that included 900 iron-fitted chariots, they maintained dominance over the Lord's people across 2 full decades. This oppression was neither mild nor brief. For a full 20 years, the Israelites existed beneath the crushing burden imposed by the Canaanites. The iron chariots referenced within the passage represented cutting-edge warfare equipment for that historical moment. They provided a substantial edge during combat, particularly when facing Israel's soldiers who fought on foot. This advantage in technology, when combined with Sisera's skillful military planning, rendered the Canaanite forces nearly unbeatable from any natural standpoint. The Israelites existed in perpetual terror, enduring mistreatment and exploitation under their oppressors. The subjugation extended beyond purely military matters, affecting their economy and community structure as well. The people of God most likely confronted burdensome taxation, limitations on their ability to travel and practice their faith, and potentially even compulsory servitude. The circumstances appeared without remedy, and numerous individuals must have questioned whether God had ceased to remember them. It was during this desperate juncture, as hope appeared to be slipping away, that God, remaining true to his covenant, elevated Deborah to serve as both judge and prophet for Israel. The scriptural account introduces her in a distinctive and striking manner. Verses 4 and 5 of Judges chapter 4 inform us that at this time, Deborah, who was a prophet and the spouse of Lapidoth, provided leadership for Israel. She conducted her judicial duties beneath the palm of Deborah, located between Ramah and Bethel, within the mountainous region of Ephraim. The Israelites traveled to her location to have their disagreements resolved. Deborah represented an unparalleled presence within Israel's recorded past. As a prophet, she obtained communications straight from God and conveyed them to the community. This spiritual function proved essential during an era when the nation had wandered so distantly from the Lord's path. Through Deborah, God was re-establishing direct contact with his people, summoning them to return to the covenant they had abandoned. In her capacity as judge, Deborah settled conflicts and rendered significant determinations for the nation. This responsibility encompassed legal, organizational, and frequently martial dimensions. The judges served as far more than simple mediators. They were chosen leaders whom God selected to direct and liberate his people. The reality that Deborah held such an authoritative role as a woman was remarkable for that historical period, proving that God possesses the ability to utilize whomever he selects to guide his people. The palm of Deborah, referenced in the biblical account, became a significant location for rendering judgment and offering counsel. This particular palm tree, positioned between Ramah and Bethel in Ephraim's hill country, was more than simply a geographic marker. It transformed into a representation of fairness and God's active presence among the community. Individuals journeyed from throughout Israel seeking Deborah's insight and direction. Seated beneath the palm tree, Deborah gave attention to the people's troubles, and guided by the Lord, she provided solutions that were both wise and equitable. This image brings to mind the significance of leaders remaining approachable. Deborah had not isolated herself within some palace or sacred building. She remained accessible to the community, prepared to listen to their difficulties and supply divine instruction. The honor and confidence that the community placed in Deborah became apparent in their actions. In a society structured around male authority, where women seldom occupied public positions of power, Deborah received acknowledgement and admiration from all of Israel. Her legitimacy stemmed not solely from her status as judge, but equally from her moral character and her intimate connection with God. Deborah's emergence as Israel's leader signified a pivotal shift in the nation's chronicle. Following 20 years under oppression, the people at last possessed a leader capable of directing them back toward God and toward liberation. Her very existence served as a perpetual testament that God had not forsaken his people, even during the bleakest moments. With Deborah securely positioned as Israel's judge and prophet, the conditions were established for a significant transformation in circumstances. The people had pleaded with God for rescue, and now, working through Deborah, the Lord prepared to provide his answer. The book of Judges conveys how God set this liberation process into motion. In verse 6 of chapter 4, we learn that she summoned Barak, the son of Abinoam, from Kedesh, located in Naphtali. She communicated to him that the Lord, Israel's God, issues this directive: proceed and gather 10,000 soldiers from Naphtali and Zebulun, then advance with them toward Mount Tabor. This divine summons, transmitted through Deborah, indicated the start of a fresh chapter in Israel's chronicle. God not only selected Deborah for leadership, but also identified Barak as the military leader who would guide Israel into confrontation against those who oppressed them. Barak's selection was far from random. He originated from Kedesh within the Naphtali territory, among the regions experiencing the most severe Canaanite domination. This reality meant Barak possessed personal motivation for his people's freedom. Moreover, being a resident of that area, he presumably possessed extensive knowledge of the landscape, which would provide tactical benefits in the approaching conflict. The divine strategy, as communicated to Deborah, was both explicit and detailed. Barak's task was to assemble 10,000 soldiers from the Naphtali and Zebulun tribes. These two adjacent tribes occupied positions in Israel's northern territory, in close proximity to Mount Tabor, which would serve as the assembly location for the military force. The selection of Mount Tabor as the meeting point was hardly coincidental. Situated at the boundary where the territories of Naphtali, Zebulun, and Issachar converged, Mount Tabor represented a strategic selection. Its elevation, approximately 588 meters rising above sea level, offered an expansive view across the neighboring area, including the Jezreel Valley, where combat would most likely occur. Deborah proceeded to communicate God's instructions to Barak. In the 7th verse of that same chapter, she declares that she will draw Sisera, the leader of Jabin's military forces, together with his chariots and soldiers, toward the Kishon River and will place him under Barak's control. This portion of the divine communication holds particular interest. God not only guaranteed triumph, but also disclosed elements of his tactical approach. The strategy involved enticing Sisera, along with his forces, to the Kishon River. This waterway, typically nothing more than a modest stream, possessed the capacity to transform into a threatening deluge during periods of rainfall. As events would later demonstrate, this geographical feature played an essential part in the confrontation. God's commitment to hand Sisera over to Barak constituted an assurance of triumph. Nevertheless, this commitment demanded both belief and initiative from Barak. He would be required to place confidence in the word of God as transmitted by Deborah, and then act upon that confidence by assembling the military force and making preparations for combat. Barak's answer to this divine summons reveals significant information about his nature and the essence of belief. Verse 8 records Barak's statement. Barak responded to her by saying that if she accompanied him, he would proceed, but if she chose not to accompany him, he would refuse to go. Initially, Barak's answer could appear to suggest insufficient faith. After all, he had just been given a straightforward guarantee of victory directly from God. What reason would he have for hesitation about proceeding alone? However, a more thorough examination uncovers a more complex interpretation of the circumstances. Barak acknowledged the value of having Deborah present. As a prophet, she embodied God's presence and direction for the community. Having Deborah alongside him during battle would function as a continuous affirmation to the complete military force that God stood with them. Furthermore, during a period when spiritual guidance held equal importance to military command, Deborah's participation could generate assurance and bravery among the soldiers. Deborah's reply to this appeal proves equally instructive. In the 9th verse, she states that she will certainly accompany him, but due to the path he has chosen, the recognition will not belong to him, for the Lord will place Sisera under the authority of a woman. Deborah consented to go with Barak, showing her dedication to Israel's mission and her readiness to provide leadership not merely from a safe distance, but from the forefront. However, she simultaneously issued a prophetic declaration. The honor of triumph would not be credited to Barak, but rather to a woman. This prophecy stands as noteworthy for multiple reasons. Initially, it defies the prevailing cultural assumptions of that era, wherein military honor typically remained the exclusive domain of men. Additionally, it introduces an aspect of anticipation into the account. Which woman would this be? As subsequent events would reveal, the resolution to this question would prove unexpected. With the understanding between Deborah and Barak solidified, preparations for the conflict commenced. Verse 10 informs us that at that location, Barak called together the tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali. 10,000 soldiers marched upward following his command. Deborah likewise traveled upward with him. The responsibility of gathering the military force would have presented considerable challenges. Following 20 years under domination, numerous Israelites were presumably disheartened and filled with fear. Assembling 10,000 individuals prepared to confront the mighty Canaanite forces with their terrifying iron chariots demanded extraordinary bravery and conviction. The confrontation with the Canaanites represented a critical juncture in Israel's narrative, signifying the conclusion of 20 years spent under subjugation to King Jabin of Canaan. The clash between the Israelite soldiers, under the direction of Deborah and Barak, and the formidable Canaanite military commanded by Sisera, was on the verge of commencing. The book of Judges supplies a thorough account of these essential developments. In verse 12 of chapter 4, we discover that when news reached Sisera that Barak, son of Abinoam, had advanced to Mount Tabor, this intelligence regarding the Israelite assembly caught the Canaanite commander off guard, as he maintained the belief that he possessed complete authority over the territory. Sisera's response proved both rapid and determined. Verse 13 documents that Sisera brought together his entire force of 900 iron chariots, along with all his soldiers from Harosheth Hagoyim, directing them toward the Kishon River. This extensive assembly revealed how earnestly Sisera viewed the Israelite challenge. He remained resolute in his intention to eliminate the uprising, utilizing the complete force of his military power. The 900 iron chariots served as the Canaanite army's source of pride and their fundamental tactical superiority. These war machines, considered advanced for that time period, inspired fear due to their velocity, striking power, and capacity to shatter infantry arrangements. For the Israelites, who engaged in combat predominantly on foot, the possibility of confronting these chariots must have generated intense apprehension. The pivotal instant of the confrontation appears in verse 14. At that moment, Deborah instructed Barak to advance. She proclaimed this as the day when the Lord has delivered Sisera into his hands, asking rhetorically whether the Lord had not already gone before him. Therefore, Barak descended from Mount Tabor with 10,000 soldiers following behind him. This directive from Deborah to initiate the attack transcended being merely a military instruction. It represented a statement of belief. She was reinforcing God's guarantee and building courage within the Israelite forces. The question regarding whether the Lord had gone ahead of them served to remind the Israelites that their fight was not solitary, but that God himself led the confrontation. Barak's movement down from Mount Tabor, accompanied by 10,000 soldiers, must have created a remarkable spectacle. The Israelite military force, having existed under oppression for such an extended period, now advanced courageously to face those who had subjugated them. Meanwhile, the Canaanite forces moved forward with assurance, equipped with their 900 iron chariots and properly supplied soldiers. Sisera presumably anticipated a quick and conclusive triumph. The valley situated below Mount Tabor appeared ideal as a location to utilize the complete strength of his war chariots. Nevertheless, what transpired next surprised everyone. Verse 15 recounts that as Barak moved forward, the Lord threw Sisera's entire force of chariots and soldiers into complete disorder by means of the sword. This declaration assigns the triumph directly to God, suggesting that something remarkable took place on the field of battle. The account indicates that divine participation occurred, generating disarray within Sisera's forces. Although the precise circumstances are not detailed, it becomes evident that something unanticipated happened to balance the conditions and provide the Israelites with an edge over the technologically superior Canaanites. Numerous scholars hold the view that environmental factors fulfilled an essential function in this confrontation. Evidence suggests that an abrupt storm may have developed, transforming the landscape in their favor. The Kishon River, ordinarily a peaceful waterway, could have evolved into a threatening torrent with the unexpected rainfall. If this scenario proves accurate, the effect on the combat would have been substantial. A severe downpour would have converted the valley's earth into thick mud, transforming the iron chariots from an asset into a liability. The horses would have faced difficulty pulling the massive chariots through the waterlogged ground, rendering them vulnerable targets for the Israelite foot soldiers. Furthermore, if the Kishon River truly overflowed its banks, numerous Canaanite soldiers, quite possibly those trapped in the immobilized chariots, might have been carried away by the surging waters. The Israelite warriors, conversely, being lighter and possessing greater familiarity with the landscape, would have gained a considerable edge under such circumstances. The situation on the battlefield must have descended into disorder. Picture the Canaanite forces, filled with confidence regarding their technological advantage, abruptly discovering themselves defenseless against natural forces. The iron chariots, their supreme source of pride, had now become instruments of death, trapped within the mud or being swept away by the flooding waters. Terror presumably spread rapidly throughout the Canaanite formations. Observing their chariots rendered useless, and their fellow soldiers either defeated or dragged off by the river, numerous fighters most likely attempted to escape. The confusion within Sisera's forces, as referenced in the scriptural account, may have stemmed from this convergence of unexpected developments and hostile natural circumstances. Simultaneously, the Israelite military force, emboldened by the unmistakable divine participation, must have pressed their attack with intensified energy. Verse 16 conveys that Barak pursued both the chariots and the forces all the way to Harosheth Hagoyim. Every single one of Sisera's soldiers perished by the blade. Not one individual remained alive. This unrelenting chase guaranteed that Israel's triumph was thorough. Simply defeating the Canaanite forces on the battlefield proved insufficient. To ensure Israel's liberty, the enemy's capacity for warfare had to be entirely eliminated. The statement indicating that not one individual remained carries particular weight. It confirms that Israel's triumph was both total and unconditional. The formerly powerful Canaanite military force, with its dreaded iron chariots, had been utterly destroyed. This triumph represented the termination of Canaanite domination over Israel. Verse 23 brings the battle account to a close, stating that on this day God brought Jabin, the Canaanite monarch, into submission before the Israelites. This concluding declaration emphasizes once more that victory arrived from God, not simply from human power or tactical planning. The confrontation with the Canaanites surpassed being merely a military engagement. It constituted a pivotal instant in Israel's narrative, a transformative point that indicated the termination of 20 years spent under oppression. It additionally served as a forceful display of God's authority and steadfastness. For the Israelites, this triumph must have represented a life-altering occurrence. Following decades filled with terror and submission, they discovered themselves victorious over those who had oppressed them. The assurance and bravery they obtained on this day would generate an enduring influence, affecting not only their personal existence, but the entire nation's future. Following the catastrophic defeat of his military forces, Sisera, the previously feared Canaanite commander, discovered himself facing a critical predicament. The individual who had commanded 900 iron chariots against Israel now fled alone on foot, attempting to evade the persistent chase conducted by Barak and his soldiers. During his frantic flight, Sisera wandered far from the combat zone, abandoning the chaos and devastation behind him. He ran for his survival, understanding that capture would result in inevitable death. As he escaped, Sisera must have contemplated the remarkable reversal of circumstances. Merely hours before, he had been assured of his approaching triumph over the rebellious Israelites. At present, he existed as a fugitive, his forces annihilated, his authority destroyed. Exhausted and desperate, Sisera sought a location for concealment. At that moment, he noticed the encampment belonging to the Kenites. The Kenites represented a wandering group who preserved amicable connections with both the Israelites and the Canaanites. Sisera possessed knowledge that peaceful relations existed between Jabin, Hazor's monarch, and the household of Heber the Kenite. In his thinking, this indicated he could discover secure sanctuary among them. Drawing near to the settlement, Sisera observed a tent that belonged to Jael, Heber's spouse. During that historical period, customary practice allowed women to possess their individual tents, separate from their husbands. Observing Jael positioned outside her dwelling, Sisera moved toward her, seeking shelter. Jael, seeing the Canaanite leader approaching, went forward to greet him. She identified him without delay, and comprehending his critical situation, perceived an opportunity. Jael extended an invitation to Sisera to enter her tent, providing him with safety and rest. Appreciative of the shelter being offered, Sisera stepped into Jael's tent. He was drained from the combat and the flight that followed, and the assurance of a protected hiding location proved irresistible. Placing confidence in the partnership between his monarch and the Kenites, Sisera reduced his vigilance. Once positioned inside the tent, Sisera requested water for drinking, as his escape had left him parched. Jael, however, exceeded his request. Rather than providing water, she presented Sisera with milk from a skin. This extra demonstration of generosity probably functioned to make Sisera feel even more comfortable, persuading him that he was truly protected. After consuming the milk, Sisera, experiencing increased security and yielding to weariness, asked Jael to position herself at the tent's opening. He directed her to deny his whereabouts should anyone inquire. Confident regarding his safety, Sisera subsequently reclined to rest, rapidly falling into profound slumber. It was during this instant that Jael reached a determination that would alter history's trajectory. While Sisera slept, she obtained a tent peg along with a hammer. Without making sound, she moved toward the sleeping commander. With a single forceful and accurate strike, Jael drove the peg through Sisera's temple, penetrating his head and securing it to the earth. Jael's action proved both quick and conclusive. Sisera, caught entirely without defense during his sleep, perished immediately. The mighty commander who had previously brought terror to Israel throughout 2 decades met his conclusion at a woman's hands within a tent in the wilderness. Jael's decision to end Sisera's life represented an action requiring tremendous courage and involving significant danger. She remained conscious of the potential repercussions she might encounter if her deed were uncovered by Sisera's supporters. Nevertheless, Jael elected to align her allegiance with Israel's people, fulfilling an essential function in their rescue. In the meantime, Barak maintained his chase of Sisera, tracking the path left by the escaping commander. He ultimately reached the Kenite settlement. Upon his approach, Barak encountered Jael, who emerged from her tent to receive him. Jael called toward Barak, stating that he should approach, and she would reveal to him the individual he was seeking. Curious and potentially somewhat cautious, Barak accompanied Jael into her dwelling. Inside, he came upon a startling sight. Sisera lay deceased on the earth, with the peg still penetrating his temple. The vision of Sisera's lifeless form must have constituted a moment filled with both triumph and relief for Barak. The individual who had subjected Israel to oppression for such an extended duration, the leader of the forces that once appeared unconquerable, now rested defeated. Surprisingly, his defeat had not arrived through the actions of a great warrior, but rather through a brave woman. This instant signified the completion of Deborah's prophetic words. Prior to the confrontation, when Barak showed reluctance to command the forces without Deborah's accompaniment, she had proclaimed that the recognition for victory would belong to a woman. At present, this forecast was realized in an unforeseen manner through Jael's deed. Sisera's death by Jael's hand represented the concluding strike in the Canaanites' defeat. With their formidable commander deceased, their military forces destroyed, and their iron chariots eliminated, Canaanite control over Israel had effectively terminated. In the aftermath of the decisive triumph over the Canaanites and Sisera's demise, Deborah and Barak performed a song celebrating victory. This composition, preserved within Judges chapter 5, stands as among the most ancient examples of Hebrew poetic expression and provides a distinctive viewpoint on the developments that had recently transpired. The song commences with an appeal to commemorate. Deborah and Barak called upon the community to offer praise to the Lord for the magnificent rescue he had supplied. They recognized that God had granted triumph to Israel, vanquishing their adversaries and shattering the burden of subjugation. Within the song's introduction, Deborah identifies herself as a maternal figure in Israel, a designation reflecting her guidance and concern for the community. She summons monarchs and rulers to listen to her composition, raising the importance of the occurrence she prepares to describe. The composition then moves backward temporally, portraying Israel's state prior to the confrontation. It presents a nation experiencing crisis, with abandoned roadways due to travelers' apprehension of attacks. Settlements had been deserted, and ordinary existence had come to a halt until Deborah emerged as a leader. Deborah and Barak recall the manner in which Israel's people had selected unfamiliar deities, producing warfare at their entrances. They observe that among 40,000 present in Israel, neither protective shield nor weapon could be located, emphasizing the defenseless and exposed condition of the community before the conflict. The composition subsequently continues to commend the tribes that answered the summons for combat. Ephraim, Benjamin, Manasseh, Zebulun, and Issachar receive honor for dispatching their fighters. The commanders of these tribes are celebrated for their bravery and readiness to endanger their lives for Israel's mission. Simultaneously, the song delivers harsh condemnation toward the tribes that elected not to take part in the confrontation. Reuben, Gilead, which is Gad, Dan, and Asher, face rebuke for remaining at their residences, attending to their personal matters while their kinsmen engaged in combat. The account then shifts to the confrontation itself. It portrays how Canaan's monarchs arrived for battle but obtained no riches of silver. This references their absolute defeat, wherein they not only failed to gain anything but forfeited everything. Among the most captivating verses within the composition declares that from the celestial realm the stars engaged in combat. From their appointed paths they fought in opposition to Sisera. This poetic expression implies cosmic participation in the confrontation, potentially referencing natural occurrences that supported Israel's triumph. The composition then references the Kishon River, identifying it as an age-old waterway and portraying how it carried away the adversaries. This reinforces the previous account that environmental factors, quite possibly an abrupt flood, fulfilled an essential function in the Canaanites' defeat. Jael, the woman responsible for ending Sisera's life, obtains particular commendation within the composition. She receives the designation of most blessed among women for her brave action. The song presents vivid details regarding how Jael killed Sisera, highlighting the paradox of a powerful warrior meeting defeat at a woman's hands within her tent. Subsequently appears a moving scene envisioning Sisera's mother anxiously awaiting her son's arrival. The composition portrays her gazing through the window, questioning why Sisera's chariot experiences such delay. Her attending ladies attempt to provide comfort, proposing that they are simply delayed due to dividing the spoils obtained from combat. This scene functions to create contrast between the Canaanites' anticipation of triumph and their genuine defeat. The composition reaches its conclusion with a forceful supplication. In this manner may all who oppose you perish, O Lord. Yet may those who hold affection for you resemble the sun during its ascent in full brilliance. This closing verse captures the composition's fundamental theme: the Lord's triumph over his adversaries, and the elevation of those who remain faithful to him. Following the song, the scriptural account observes that the territory experienced tranquility for 40 years. This duration of peace resulted directly from the triumph over the Canaanites and Deborah's guidance. The song performed by Deborah and Barak fulfills multiple significant purposes within the account. Initially, it provides a poetic summary of the battle developments, maintaining the recollection of this essential moment throughout Israel's narrative. Additionally, the composition supplies further information that remains absent from the prose account. For instance, it offers a more distinct image of which tribes took part in the confrontation and which refrained, details not previously mentioned. Third, the composition functions as a theological interpretation of the developments. It continuously emphasizes that triumph originated from the Lord, not merely from Israel's martial power. This strengthens the fundamental concept of the Book of Judges. When Israel maintains faithfulness toward God, he provides them triumph over their adversaries. Fourth, the composition operates as a communal celebration of the triumph. It not only recounts the occurrences, but extends an invitation to the community to experience joy and offer praise to God for his rescue. This would assist in cementing the recollection of these developments within Israel's collective awareness. Finally, the composition functions as a testament for subsequent generations. Through being maintained and presumably performed repeatedly across the years, it would preserve the memory of this magnificent rescue alive, encouraging future generations to place confidence in God throughout periods of difficulty. The song created by Deborah and Barak stands as remarkable not solely for its substance, but equally for its structure. It is regarded as among the most ancient specimens of Hebrew poetic composition we possess. Its vivid expression and forceful imagery establish it as a remarkable literary creation. The composition's arrangement, shifting between recounting events, offering praise, and even presenting an imagined scene from the adversary's perspective, reveals substantial literary refinement. This indicates that even during this initial stage of Israel's chronicle, an abundant tradition of poetic creation already existed. The employment of parallelism, a characteristic element of Hebrew poetic form, appears evident throughout the entire composition. Numerous lines receive repetition with delicate modifications, establishing a cadence and emphasis that would have generated power when performed or recited. Following the magnificent triumph over the Canaanites and the commemoration documented in Deborah and Barak's composition, Israel transitioned into a duration of tranquility and abundance. The Book of Judges conveys that the territory experienced rest for 40 years, representing a considerable period of calm and steadiness for the nation. This duration of tranquility served as direct evidence of Deborah's effective guidance and the permanent influence of her triumph over the Canaanites. The conclusive defeat of Sisera, along with his forces, eliminated the principal external danger to Israel, permitting the community to exist without apprehension of invasion or subjugation. Throughout this period, Deborah maintained her service as Israel's judge. Her insight and discernment, which had proven essential during the period of crisis, now held equal worth in preserving peace and resolving internal conflicts. Deborah's influence as judge, prophet, and martial leader proved both deep and enduring. She emerged as an uncommon illustration of female guidance during an era and culture controlled by men. Her account functioned as a forceful testament that God possesses the ability to utilize anyone, without consideration of gender or social position, to fulfill his intentions. Deborah's impact reached far beyond her personal lifetime. Her account provided inspiration to subsequent generations of Israelites, functioning as a pattern of bravery, belief, and intelligent guidance. The composition of Deborah, in particular, maintained its recitation and examination, preserving the recollection of her magnificent triumph in living memory. Deborah's achievement as a leader additionally established a significant precedent within Israel. She proved that successful guidance originates not from bodily power or martial authority, but from insight, belief, and the capacity to generate inspiration and unity among the community. This pattern of guidance would shape future leaders throughout Israel, including monarchs and prophets. The duration of tranquility that emerged following Deborah's triumph permitted Israel to develop strength as a nation. Absent the perpetual danger of invasion, the community could direct their attention toward agricultural pursuits, commercial exchange, and the advancement of their settlements. This period of abundance and protection represented evidence of God's favor upon the nation when they maintained faithful adherence to him. Nevertheless, as the Book of Judges repeatedly demonstrates, this tranquility would not continue indefinitely. In time, a fresh generation would emerge that possessed no knowledge of the Lord or the actions he had accomplished for Israel. The repeating pattern of spiritual rebellion, subjugation, and rescue would commence once more. In spite of this, Deborah's legacy persisted. Her account maintained its telling, her composition maintained its performance, and her illustration of faithful guidance maintained its capacity to provide inspiration. She evolved into a symbolic presence within Israel's chronicle, a woman who emerged during a period of crisis and, through her belief and bravery, modified the trajectory of her nation's narrative. Deborah's account imparts multiple significant teachings. It reveals that God frequently selects unexpected individuals to fulfill his intentions. It serves as a reminder that genuine power originates from belief and adherence to God, not from martial or governmental authority. And it provides encouragement for us to emerge and take action with bravery when confronted with difficulties, placing confidence that God will remain with us. May we, following Deborah's example, possess the bravery to remain firm when facing hardship, the insight to guide with fairness, and the belief to maintain confidence that God remains actively working even during the most challenging situations. If this account provided you with inspiration and you wish to maintain your exploration of the abundant narratives contained within the Bible, please remember to subscribe to our channel. Through subscribing, you will obtain notifications regarding our forthcoming videos, in which we will maintain our uncovering of the captivating accounts and teachings found in Scripture. Furthermore, if you discovered value in this video, we encourage you to distribute it among your friends and family members. Who can predict how many individuals might receive inspiration and encouragement through Deborah's account? We express our appreciation for watching, and we maintain our hope to encounter you in our subsequent video. Until that time arrives, May we all obtain inspiration from Deborah's illustration to exist with bravery, belief, and intention.